engineers, creating a location-based entertainment experience for the ETC Fall Festival.
We now landed on the idea of the Return of the Dragons,
Massive dragon puppet.
Safety is our utmost priority. On audio leakage, the whole team is going to IAPA.
They actually read the scales from
the room that have the
Hello, we are Little Big Engineers. Oh, thank you. My name is Nolan. With me are Lori, Cleo, Kat, and Ivy, and we created Return of the Dragon, an interactive walkthrough attraction for the ETC Fall Festival. Our experience took place in room 2310, which we chose for its size and proximity. We set up a pipe and drape system to divide our experience into district zones in order to prevent bottlenecks. Each zone takes longer than the prior one, and in total, our experience runs about 10 minutes. We were also able to utilize 3 rooms for our post-show adventures: Jessica Hammer's office, a 3rd floor interview room, and a 5th floor visiting faculty office.
Now let's walk through the experience and our process in more detail. Our experience began with a queue in the hallway outside of our project room. This is where the guests learn that they are elemental mages, and that with the dragon scales, they may be able to succeed in restoring dragons to the realm. They received their scales through some sleight of hand and proceeded inside. Regarding this interaction and all of them, our guests interact with actors throughout. We recruited 7 people and rehearsed with them in weeks 13 and 14. We gave them the ability to improv and provided them with a world-building Bible so that they could answer guest questions consistently. Then, our guests proceeded into the next zone, the pre-show.
In the pre-show room, they will watch a video which tells them about the background story of the realm of Ragnarok, the dragons, and the problem facing dragon and magic. The guests will know that their duty is to revive the dragon eggs and to regain the dragon's trust. The production of the video is a semester-long process, which starts from the storyboard and then to the final version with our original soundtrack. We also adjusted the script to deal with the sound leakage problems. After consulting with Jesse, Chris, and Dave, we found out that the sound leakage problems is inevitable, so we adjusted our script so that it makes sense that multiple groups of guests and the dragon already exist in the room. Well, these adjustments did make our video become longer. It actually helped us manage our throughput because this makes sure that the first room is the longest room in our experience. And also from our survey results, most guests are still satisfied with this length.
Then our guests proceeded into the tutorial zone. The guests learn how to harness the power of fire, water, and air under the tutelage of an elemental guild member. They tapped their scales on the elemental guild sigil, seen here, to activate each element. This section of the experience runs on fidgets hidden inside these boxes, which are engraved with the elemental sigil. We prioritized testing the fidgets and RFIDs early, and experimented with different ways of hiding the fidget hardware that would not affect the RFID read distance. Ultimately, we used these laser-cut, hardboard composite boxes. Our playtests also help us refine the structure of these first 2 zones. We realized that the elemental magic experience was quite short and would create a bottleneck. So we removed physical barriers between the zone and the previous one and would only let in 1 group for both zones. This removed the bottleneck, so despite decreasing our throughput, this change was worth it.
Then, our guests proceeded into the Dragon Temple to solve an ancient riddle. In this area, the dragon eggs have been preserved and locked into these cages for millennia. Since their mother was summoned that night to the temple, the guests needed to revive the eggs immediately by matching the egg's elemental symbol to the corresponding elemental magic indicated by the riddle. When guests successfully figure out the combinations, reed switches behind The puzzle, combined with the information from the RFID reader, will change the lighting and the sound, and ultimately, when all three combinations were solved, a solenoid lock in each of these cages freed the eggs from their slumber. Playtesting was particularly important for the puzzle, starting when it was just a cardboard prototype in Hunt Library to a refined prototype at Playtest Day to our final wooden version that you see here and that we saw at our throughput stress test. Through these playtests, we were able to refine the difficulty of this puzzle. For throughput reasons, our puzzle could not be any longer than 4 minutes to complete, but it couldn't be any shorter than 2 minutes. Our first attempt saw our puzzle being very difficult and an average solve time of about 7 minutes. After 6 revisions, the puzzle solve time ended up at an average of 2 minutes and 2.5 minutes, the perfect length for our experience. We also found that at this length, the answer felt meaningful, not just trivial. Then, our guests proceeded through a dark and mysterious hall. As a mage led them into the inner sanctum of the dragon temple, the guests heard the dragon roaring. Could it be? I believe so. Yes, bring the eggs. I think it's here. Yes, it's here. Ladies and gentlemen, the elemental dragon. She's enraged. Ivy, she needs her eggs. The egg of water, the egg of fire, and the egg of air. Yes, she's finally at peace. And she's now able to tell us how she works.
So our elemental dragon is a 2-person puppet, 1 physical puppet, and 1 digital puppet. The physical puppeteer is responsible for the physical movement of the dragon, as well as the jaw open and close, and the eye blink, which is on a pull string. Our eyelids are connected, so there's no possibility of our dragon winking, and also with the pull string in one hand and the lever in the other, it is possible for 1 puppeteer to control the entire puppet. The puppet is suspended from a pipe and drape unit, meaning that the puppeteer doesn't support any of the puppet's weight, but rather acts as a counterbalance in order to control the dragon head. Our digital puppeteer is responsible for sound and lighting cues.
Now, this scene does have some big differences from the version that we presented at halves. The main one is that the complex puzzle scene then was distracting from the true show-stopping element, obviously the dragon. So we eliminated this puzzle, focused on the puzzle station before the dragon, and made our final encounter an on-rails interaction, focused solely on the dragon and on her eggs.
In order that the puppeteers could see without being seen, we had 3 webcams set up in the dragon room. 2 of these were primarily for the digital puppeteer, who used them to see when guests entered the chamber and when guests had put the eggs in the nest so that they could respond with the dragon cues accordingly. We also had 1 webcam hidden in the dragon's elemental iridescent crown, which enabled the physical puppeteer to see guests in the chamber and respond to guest actions accordingly. This also removed the possibility of the dragon bumping actors or guests, which did occur a couple of times in playtests. Additionally, with a lot of help from the ETCs Dave Perda and CMU Fire and Safety, we were successfully able to construct a jig and hose for an elemental fog machine so that our dragon could breathe fog lit with red light without compromising any safety. We also gave out these post-show scales as giveaways to indicate that the dragon now trusts their guests.
We set up the command center in the middle of the room. Most of our machinery, such as the computers that's running the show control system and the fog machine, and also a lot of wiring, were hidden in that space. It also served as a puppeteering area and the changing room for our actors. Software-wise, we are running 2 completely separate show control programs. One to control the overall environmental light, the tutorial space, and the dragon show. And the other managed the puzzle. We anticipated the possibility of needing to manually restart the puzzle because most of the guest interaction happens there. Therefore, we host the program completely separated from the rest of the experience so that we were able to restart the program without interrupting the other part of the experience. We placed the computer that is running the puzzle program directly in the puzzle room so that we can avoid running wires across the room and the hallway. And then we set up another laptop inside the command center to remote into that computer so that we will still be able to monitor and control it. We also prepared the tags for our staffs to control the room, such as to reset the room or unlock the cages. And we also dressed them up as the dragon scale to make sure they're in theme in case the guest sees them. Aside from the scales, the command center can also control all the rooms just as a backup. Finally, the guests use the giveaway RFID tags hidden inside the giveaway scales to activate the postal adventures in 3 vacant rooms around the building. These scales can activate the animation, that is the baby dragons hatching using their power and flying by tapping to the RFID module running on the standalone Raspberry Pi stations.
We also want to discuss elements of our process that extended throughout the whole experience. Starting off with lighting. We lit our experience with a combination of lights, especially these kits we have received graciously from Todd Brown, CMU drama lighting professor. They all came with Gantom DMX lights, which are very lightweight. And we also used DMX lights owned by the ETC. Here is a map of our lighting placement. And as you have seen, the dragon was lit within to show her mood using 5 lightweight Gantom lights. Safety was critical, so we worked with CMU FMS, protected flooring in wet areas, and made safety warning and exit signs. We are proud to report that there were no safety incidents at our event. In addition to editing our story to account for the audio leakage, we also composed an ambient soundtrack, our own original music, and dragon breathing sounds to create a thematic white noise. Each zone also has its own sounds activated by guest interactions, and we're iterated those for moods and levels. The final version introduces a D major chord from the climax of the dragon zone earlier in the puzzle zone to create continuity between the dragon eggs as you place them in the nest, as you just previously saw. The AV system included the TV for the pre-show, the projector for the riddle inside the puzzle area, and webcams for the puppet. None of this needed programming. So Lori, how was Festival?
Well, how was Festival? In terms of festival throughput, we were planning for a maximum of 216 guests, or about 54 guests per hour. We ended up hosting a total of 171 guests, or about 43 guests per hour. That's also equivalent to about 11 groups per hour. In hosting 171 guests, we also met our goals to host every guest that queued for our experience, as well as never have a wait time of over 20 minutes. We informed guests of this wait time with a posted estimated wait sign outside of our room and kept that updated in real time throughout the evening. In terms of guest response, here's a quick guest testimonial from our guest from SimCoach.
This was incredible.
Lord, that was a Disney ride.
Yeah, that was an experience. Like, even when we got going through it, we were reacting very much so.
Yeah, that was not an animatronic puppet to me.
So thank you very much to our guest from SimCoach for that glowing review. And in general, we got very positive feedback from our festival guests. However, not everything is rainbows and magical dragons. On the night of festival, our team did face a few anticipated challenges as well as a few unanticipated challenges. Anticipated challenges, such as specifically needing to reset our puzzle program, were accounted for in our operations design for our experience. However, we met with a few unanticipated challenges as well. In particular, we had one group that was particularly slower than others at completing the puzzle, to the point where our actors had to intervene and stall our next guests in order to keep the experience moving smoothly. Additionally, we learned towards the end of festival that one of our post-show monitors had gone to sleep, even though we had checked the sleep settings on it that morning. Now, it would not have been possible to make this experience without the support of so many other people. It takes a village to build a guild. The Elemental Guild would like to thank our project instructors, Ruth and Shirley, our wonderful alumni consultant, Christine Barnes, our design intern, sophomore Louise Cutter from CMU Drama, our project consultant, Dave, and all of these incredible mages that helped make our experience possible. A special shout out to our actors, Sarah, Joey, Louise, Martina, Marie, Derek, and Yukti, because this project would have not succeeded without them or without any of these people's support.
And in closing, we are Little Big Engineers, and we created a location-based entertainment experience that uses large-scale puppetry and RFIDs for the ETC Fall Festival. We are now open for questions. Yes, Ricardo.
Okay, so you had to stall a team. Hope it wasn't mine. How did you do that, and what what advice would you give to someone else who would have to do that just on the fly?
That's a really good question. I'll take that. The question was about how did we end up stalling guests who took too long, or rather the group of guests who was waiting to move into the puzzle room. So we used themed improv. So one idea that actually one of our actors came up with was saying, so do you feel connected to the element of fire? What about you makes you feel like you have the roaring flame of courage in your heart, and things like that. Another thing was to ask them about the festival in world. So what was your favorite thing that you have seen on your travels throughout the realm of Eigenrock tonight? And things like that that got them to talk about the festival. And as for advice, I would say that definitely having our world-building Bible so that the actors knew kind of what vocabulary to use, for example, it's realm, not world, and things like that, absolutely helped. Another piece of advice would be to give the actors in the room that you anticipate might have slowdowns, for ours it was the puzzle, the ability to override if the guests are taking too long. So we did say, actors, if the guests are taking more than 4 minutes on this puzzle, use your puzzle unlock scale and say, the magic has activated with you all here. Look at these, and then proceed. So, plan ahead, basically. I'll run to the back. I'll get Heather.
So you guys spent a fair bit of resources on the post-show adventure. You had one of the machines shut down, which probably hindered it from totally succeeding. But I'm wondering if you have any data of like how many people actually followed up on that and used it.
Yes, so we have the data on the second floor post-show room, and we have a 72 count of the interaction with the machine, and also because we gave everybody in the team a scale, so it's very likely it is 72 teams instead of 72 people. So we consider that as a pretty good number on the interaction.
And we anticipated that on the second floor we'll probably get the most traffic, so that's where we also hosted our team poster, our half sheets. We also put a QR code for a survey. And yes, so we anticipated that the second floor would get the most action. Yes, Stephen.
What factors were important for determining the design of the puppet, both technical limitations as well as performance needs?
Mm-hmm.
So the most important thing that we started with was that the puppet couldn't be too heavy. And so on the recommendation of our alumni consultant, we began building our puppet out of cardboard. So the puppet inner construction is actually like gridded cardboard, essentially, that's been carved into our final dragon shape with strips of cardboard on top. So the majority of the dragon is actually hollow. And that really helped with the weight requirement, or with the weight restriction, because no puppeteer wants to hold it. Additionally, suspending it helps with that weight restriction. And then in terms of puppet physical design, we actually did not use paper mache because we were afraid it would take too long to dry between layers. And so our entire dragon is paper mached with masking tape.
With, of course, liquid latex to service their skin and paint over that.
Yeah, the choice of puppeteer, the dragon, certainly was an opportunity to be more reactive to the audience. What worked well about that, what didn't, why didn't the dragon speak? It felt like in the actual experience, it didn't really react to what we were doing, so maybe you could just talk about that more.
Yeah, so in terms of puppeteering the dragon, there was a bit of a learning curve. We should have rehearsed more before opening night of festival. As the festival night progressed, both myself and Louise, the two puppeteers for the night, got more comfortable with puppeteering the dragon. In terms of interacting with the guests, we actually changed our experience slightly throughout the night based on what positive feedback we had received from guests earlier in the night. And so, for example, we invited guests to come up and pet the dragon, where the dragon could bump their hands and things like that to increase that sort of interaction. I'm sorry, what was the other half of the question? Oh, the talking. Okay.
Sure, yeah. So we did consider having the dragon talk, and that scene is actually all scripted out. We found that number one, it would create a huge audio leakage problem, and number two, the fact that the dragon would have to speak kind of by telekinesis rather than moving the mouth, because that is far too high of a demand, was not reading well. So we decided to have the elemental mage narrate the dragon's emotions as her eye color and horn color were changing.
Thank you all. A elemental mage will come around to collect the scales we handed out at the very beginning.
Right. Good morning, everyone. We're Team Microbeetle. We're an educational project for students from West Virginia. And my name is Sandra. I'm the artist and producer. And we have Robbie here as our programmer, Hui and Muru as our programmers, and Maria as our co-producer and experience designer. With that saying, we have support from West Liberty University as our client, Lou, and we have Bruce as our instructor, and John as post-half faculty consultant. And our project is use microbits to teach kids how to understand input and output in terminology of computer science. And we are going to ask students to collaborate within a group of 2 to 3 students. And our target audience is 6th graders, 10 to 12 age group. And finally, the project needs to be repeatable. And with that saying, we are using hardware as microbits, and we are delivering a game website. And another user guide for teachers on how to guide students on different bugs or educate kids in different ways. And finally, with microbits in mind, we have different sensor sets, and we have to ask them using Google Chromebook, as most elementary schools have. And we are going to use Unity WebGL website as our server to hold the project, and we are going to use Google Chrome as a browser. And with that same in mind, we are going to introduce our game. So we have 3 modes: story, play, and creative. Story mode is something we call for tutorial, and story mode give students a guide on how to use different things. And play mode involves into more sensors, and creative mode allows students to do a repeatable experience how to customize their different mazes. And students as our players are little engineers as microbeetles. So they're learning to how to physically wire in different things to microbits and different sensors, so to help them to better understand different input and output with a different result in visuals and physically touching the sensors. And now I'm introducing Hui to introduce the story mode.
Thank you. So the first mode we're going to have is the story mode. In this mode, the student will get a chance to first pick their own microbits, and then they will do the wiring and programming to actually solve the problems they are facing in the game. For example, like in this mode, they are going to wire the sliders and the sensors to actually use the power lock in the game to break the wall. And here's our story mode demo. First, the student will have some, go through some background story with their mentor characters. The mentor character will tell them that they will prove their engineering skill by going through the cabin challenge. And then the student will get a chance to actually customize their own beetles by choosing different colors, shapes, or textures. And then we go into the programming and wiring stage. In this stage, first they will learn about different sensors and pieces that are going to wire. And then they will follow the diagram step by step, and they will wire the things successfully. After this, they will get into the programming stage. In this stage, they will learn about the data output and input. First, they will read the data input page, and then they will fill in the values in the code box you can see in the video. After they wire the things and program the things successfully, they can see in the data page that the power log is actually working, and it is followed by the when you move your slider. And at the end of this experience, they will get into the maze and play through it, and then solve the problem in this maze. And then I will introduce Muru to tell us more about the play mode.
So basically, students will do everything they have done in story mode, but besides that, students will need to choose maze from desert, tundra, and grassland. And we also added 3 new sensors in the play mode. One is potential meters, one is touch sensors, and the last one is knob. The first one is knob potential meter, second one is photoresistor, and third one is touch sensor. So for the photoresistor, it's used to control the on and off of the headlamp, and the student will need to turn off the headlamp to hide from the mouse. And for the touch sensor, the student will need to control the touch sensor to operate the vacuum cleaner. And the students will use the vacuum cleaner to vacuum the spider web on the road. And for the knob potential meters, it's used to control the jackhammer, and it can break 3 rocks. Here is the play mode demo. So basically, it's similar to the story mode, but in the wiring stage and programming stage, we add 3 new features for each different sensors. And we learned from the playtest that the teacher found it's hard to know the minimum value and the maximum value of different sensors. So we let students to program the minimum value and maximum value of the sensor. Not only it can help students to know more about the programming, but it's also good for them to understand the range of their sensors. And in the different maze, because students will need to control multiple sensors, so at the very beginning of each maze, we will remind them that they can press the A button and B button on the micro:bits to switch their tools. So the rest is the demo. This is the spider webs. And the students will need to switch the tools by the micro:bits to get the tool they need. This is the third maze. So now it shows how students will need to input the 3 values for the knob potential meters, because there are 3 rocks for them to break. This is how the students switch the direction of the jackhammer to break 3 walls. Okay, so now I'm going to introduce Robin to talk about creative mode.
As you might recall, the requirement for our client is that this game should not be one and done. So we extended the replayability of this game even more on the play mode, and then we're delivering this creative mode. So in creative mode, students will get to customize their own maze by selecting parameters of the maze and then placing their obstacles and gems into the maze. So you can see in this demo, this is the selection part. So they get to select from the 3 biomes and the 3 layouts they have seen in the story mode, and then they can choose up to 3 obstacles they have seen before that can be put into the maze. And after everything's selected, they go into the obstacle placement stage, and they can click on the button on the left, and then left-click on the maze to place it, or they can always revert the changes that they're not happy with by right-clicking on it. So you can see they're placing gems and obstacles into the maze right now. And they right-click on this mouse, and it's just gone. So after they place 5 gems into the maze and 3 to 5 obstacles into the maze, they can go to the next stage. And this is the point that they can either finish the challenge themselves, or they can challenge their classmates to finish their maze. But after this, they will have to go through all the programming stages and wiring stages you have seen before, so that they can properly set up everything they need.
Thank you. So obviously we're not 6th graders or teachers, so we relied heavily on playtesters in our target demographic to help us figure out if our design was working and how to implement it. So as you can see on the screen, we set up different playtesting stages. We started by testing sensors with 6th graders to figure out which ones they liked, which ones were easy to understand. Then we tested our mazes to see if the sensors, devices, and obstacles that we had mapped made sense and if they were easy to solve, essentially. And we did this with both elementary school students and at CMU playtesting nights with undergrads. And then we did a playthrough of story mode with 6th graders again to see if the flow of the experience made sense and if they understood what they were doing. And finally, we playtested our teacher guide with a variety of teachers. We definitely had to adapt our original design based on playtesting. So for example, we initially had 5 sensors that we had selected from our first session that we wanted to use. But based on further playtesting, we realized that firstly, the amount of sensors that we had included in each mode they were too much, and it took more than 1 class lesson to finish 1 mode. So we scoped down. We had a water level sensor that the kids loved, but faculty had asked if it was a risk to have a water level sensor and water near electronics, which was a fair point, but also because the sensor was wet, even if you took it out of the water, we got very strange readings. So we decided that it wasn't fit for our experience. So things like that are considerations that we took after testing. So having said all this, we wanted to talk a bit about the things that we struggled with during the semester. Firstly, the first 2 that you see in this list are related to the project requirements. So the technology that we were using was a lot of fun for us to play with, and for the kids as well. But the components that are necessary to wire the sensors and to use the microbit come in a variety of shapes and sizes depending on manufacturer. And we also realized that we got different ranges of readings depending on the sensor that you buy. And so we had to adapt our game so that it's universally, quote unquote, understandable by any student or teacher, regardless of which component they are using. So we dedicated a lot of time to work that out. And we also realized that this technology is intimidating for children who might have never used something like this and teachers who might have never taught with this technology. And so we had to make it engaging and easy, even though there's a lot of things at play. We incorporated circuitry and programming, and so we had to make it fun and challenging, but not frustrating. And finally, this is more internal, but we did struggle with lack of organization as a team, and this was most detrimental towards the end. So we didn't mention playtesting play mode or story mode with our target demographic. We didn't actually get to that point. And aspects such as UI and audio are not as polished as they could have been. So that's definitely something that, as a team, we're aware that could have improved. But having talked about our struggles, we also want to talk about our successes. So through playtesting our demos, we did confirm that they are fun and educational for our target demographic. Based on observation and interviews, we know that kids enjoyed and learned from the experience. We made the game replayable, and it can span multiple lessons, which was a client requirement. And the design is teacher approved. So from teacher feedback, we know that they like the game as a tool and that they are impressed by its implementation. And finally, even though we struggle with organization, we were always open to feedback and to adapt to playtesting results, which was good for us. So finally, we obviously want to thank Lou, Ruth, and John for all their help, but we also want to thank people who helped us with playtesting and institutions, so West Liberty University, Cornell School, Mary Queen of Apostles, then Anna, Elise, and Lisa, who are listed there. They were teachers who helped us. Finally, John, Anthony, and Wayleen from CMU, and ETC, who helped us coordinate playtesting internally. So this is our project overview for your reference. We are Team Microbeetle, and we're open for questions. Thank you very much.
Could you tell us how much time a sixth grader typically would spend in the instruction text up front, the programming piece, and then playing the maze? And if you had more time, if you'd want to adjust those time percentages?
So we did time the whole story mode playthrough. And the fastest team, let's say in the classroom, took 15 minutes, the whole thing. The slowest team took between 20 and 25. The time that they took for each section was pretty much similar. I think we designed it so that the stages were, it was a similar time that they took. The team can talk about their experience, but I think that the stage that we probably would like to take more time on is a programming stage, just because there's so much that they can learn about programming. Obviously, our project was not about that, but we had to really constrain what they could do, and we knew this from the start. But yeah, there's so much that could be taught there. So that would definitely be something that we could expand upon. That said, even though it took them 15 to 20 minutes to complete that mode, we didn't account for students coming into the class, teachers welcoming the students, handing out the components. So in reality, all of that might take the 40 minutes that a class session in a school will typically take, So I think it's time just right for it to be a tool for a class session.
How many of the students who came into it had already worked with something like a microbeetle? Like, did you notice any difference in how fast students were picking it up, and did that impact any results that you saw?
Just basically, the question was how many students were familiar with the same tool, and how many times they're taking, how long it takes to recognize there's different components. So from playtesting observations, we asked students if they know this thing before, if they know macrobits before, and some 1% to 2% students were saying they know macrobits and they've tried this before in their elementary schools. Most of the students were saying we have no idea what we're going to use, and each component was pretty identical to each other. For example, we have sliders, we have photoresistors, and all the other components that we test on, they were pretty identical to each other. So student was having no problem to identify which one they need to wire. And sometimes we put different instructions, so we did different in the tutorial mode. for this different diagrams to teach them which line or which wire we need to wire in different ports. So the most confusion came from how they should wire different sensors. So that part took them the longest time for students to wire just like simply sensors to microbit motherboard. So that's the most difficult one.
To very quickly add to that, the microbit is designed to be used with alligator clips and not necessarily for the simplest activities, not to use with sensors. So we had to like step out of what the tutorials and documentations usually do. So even the students who have used the microbit, this was new for them.
Since it is not a one and done, can they skip the story mode, the tutorial, and then play in either one, play or creative?
I will say yes, because we also have tutorial in each mode. As I said, even we add new sensors in play mode, and play mode have full tutorials of the 3 sensors. But I would suggest teacher to start as the story mode, because story mode only has 1 sensors, and it will be more easier for students to understand only 1 sensor. But I will say yes, that they can skip story mode and directly play mode. So the homepage is set up like this, so they can access anything, nothing is locked, but it's up to the teacher to facilitate and instruct what they should do at each time.
We are a team of 4 second-year ETC students. Our instructor are Brenda and Scott. Our client is Melanie and Daniel from the Alice project. Alice is a block-based programming environment for students to learn 3D sim building and interactive stories. However, it is currently a single-user experience. So the question will be given for our client is, can collaborative learning be the future of Alice? To answer the question, we developed Alice Gather, a 2-player experience that enables 2 students with minimum programming experience to build animated scenes through a series of collaborative activities. So, how is our experience different from Alice? Alice definitely provides a wide range of functionalities, and it's meant to be replayed by experienced users. Moreover, it is very open-ended, so it provides a lot of different use cases. On the other hand, our experience focuses more on the collaborative aspect, and also we're making it very structured so that we focus less on the functionalities, but we focus more on the intuitiveness because we are aiming to serve first-time users. Our target audience is students in between grade 5 and 8 with minimum programming experience. Also, it is designed to be as an introductory in-class activity without prior preparation. Also, the transformational outcome should be that the students will learn the fundamental of 3D sim building and block programming and be motivated to learn computer science in the future. Our platform is web-based and supports online multiplayer, and it is built with Unity. To build an animation in our experience, the students will need to go through 4 different collaborative activities. And now I'm going to pass it to Zhiqi and Rick to talk about it.
Thank you, Shirley. So, play the video. So this is a complete walkthrough of our experience. Players can use randomly generated code to connect with their partner. We have a detailed introduction before each phase, but we are skipping them for the sake of the demonstration. So here is the first step of the picking prompt. Each student can choose a main character at the same time, and the partner selection will appear in the upper right corner. So in this step, 2 students are assigned different tasks. One of them needs to choose a place, another one needs to choose an event. And then they will get a full prompt. In this case, Alice and the cat have a sports competition in a desert. Here's the tutorial. After the prompt selection, each student has the freedom to choose the models from the asset library. We also categorize the models in order to make it easier for players to choose a desired model. They can also see each other's selection. Here's the tutorial again. Before the sim building, they also need to create the environment. One of the students need to decide the texture of the ground. Another one need to choose the color of the the sky, color of the sky. And so here they are building the scene. So we can see they can move the items, they can change the scale of the models. They can also rotate them.
And after finishing the sim building part, we move on to the block programming phase. In this part, you can add code blocks to your thread from the library on the left side, and your partner's code will be shown on the right side. And by adding and rearranging the code blocks, 2 players can create a sequential animation based on the story prompt they selected earlier. And finally, they can record the whole animation as a video file and download locally. Here's an example we created.
Great. So we have made a lot of design decisions to foster a positive collaborative environment. One example being the collaborative idea generation process in the prompt picking. In order to prevent kids from fighting to each other to get their ideas chosen, we followed the yes and principle from our improv class and came up with a system where 2 kids each take on one half of the prompt. This system helps kids to generate ideas together while having a strong sense of collaboration. Another common barrier during the collaboration is griefing, which means users tend to destroy with each other's work when facing the idea conflict. To avoid that, we designed an ownership system. In the same building phase, each student only owns the item they selected. They could only move, rotate, and edit the object they own. And then to solve this problem of the conflict by passing the requesting and passing the model, the ownership back and forth, this system further ensures that the collaboration is always positive between 2 players.
And in the code blocking phase, your code and your partner's code will be synchronized through the network. And once running the code, the 2 threads will be executed simultaneously. So 2 players need to understand and organize their code to get aligned with each other, which encourages them to learn more about programming. Here's an example. And to further foster collaboration, we introduced event-based programming. That is, we built a communication channel between 2 threads, which blocks one thread from executing further until it receives another signal from the other thread. And it helps to get aligned with each other's timelines to do take-turns activities. And players can also learn the idea of event-based programming, which is very common in modern programming languages. Here's an example. And as for the animation, we export models from Alice into Mixamo, and we rig the characters in Mixamo, which created a standard skeleton that is compatible with all the animation files in Mixamo. And finally, we import all the animation files into Unity and apply them to all the characters. This is currently unachievable in Alice, so we created documentations about how to do that for the Alice team. And I'm gonna pass it to Jingyu.
Thank you, Eric. So our team has definitely learned a lot throughout the entire semester, and I want to break it down into two parts to talk about our takeaways and how we get those. So we completed all major features at week 10, and prior to that, we conducted 5 rounds of playtests to validate our design and iterate on different aspects of our experience. So post week 10, we started to draw conclusion from our project by consulting with computer science educators to have them look at our experience and share their insights. And we also held 2 40-minute sessions in a middle school classroom to put our experience into practice and see how our kids react to them in a real use case. So based on our early playtest, one of the biggest challenges we faced was adopting the Alice experience into our own. Around halves, we have implemented several features from Alice, including the infinite creation space, the unlimited assets, the free 3D camera movement, and having no tutorial. And this has resulted in a lot of unwanted behaviors in our early playtest. Mainly, kids are spending about 80% of their time in scene building because they have this infinite space and infinite assets. They feel naturally inclined to just put every single object into the scene just to see how they look like, which is not something we want. And because they are also first-time user for any 3D creation software, they feel really challenged to even understand the 3D camera movement. So realizing these challenges, we pivoted after halves to turn our creation space from this infinite plane into a confined and simplistic platform. And we used an asymmetric camera angle to make sure that they can always get a whole view of the entire scene without actually needing to move the camera. We also added the object selection phase, as introduced by Jiqi earlier. This design limits their access to the asset library and further guides them to make more thoughtful choices. We also came up with a tutorial system with an animated intro at the beginning to give them an overview and the context of the experience, and a more detailed video guide to help them navigate through our program within the experience. So these changes resulted in a huge improvement in our following playtest. We have reduced the playtime on scene building from 80% to about 50% of the session. And because kids are now making a lot less decisions, but those decisions has become much more thoughtful because they're actually selecting and placing objects that actually serves the narrative. And furthermore, with the addition of the detailed tutorials, our experience has become much more intuitive for first-time players. So after having a solid game at week 10, we consulted with 3 computer science educators, Jennifer, Donald, and Keith. They all shared a lot of helpful insights, but they also had the same opinion that our experience is suitable for an introductory level in-class activity. And Mr. Donald Slater graciously helped us by allowing us to integrate our experience into his classroom at St. David's School. And we had 2 class sessions with 8 students in his class. So the 2 class sessions at St. David's School was very successful in our opinion, as it validated a lot of our hypotheses. Kids were able to understand all concepts with minimal facilitation and instruction from either our team or their instructor, and they were able to complete the experience within the class time, which is 40 minutes. And throughout the entire session, we have witnessed very high level of engagement and extensive communication. However, one thing we realized is that the playtime is still a bit unbalanced in different sessions because there are some sessions in which kids spend significantly more time on scene building as opposed to doing programming. So we do want to share some testimonial from the educators. Don was especially happy with the collaboration aspect of our project, especially knowing what the potential is. And Keith pointed out that one of the challenges in having collaborative programming activity in school is that one kid usually takes on all the work. And our experience kind of prevents that problem with a new solution which allows kids to take on equal amount of responsibility. So that ensures the equal amount of learning outcome. So to wrap up the semester, we're delivering the build and source file to Alice with all the documentation on our design and findings. We're also discussing ways to provide continuous support after the end of the semester, as recently we have received inquiries from other teachers and local educational facilities expressing interest to integrate our experience into their classroom. So to conclude our semester, we think our experience introduced a new way to have collaborative programming activity in class. The collaboration structure allows students to learn through exploration, thus requiring very minimal instruction and facilitation from the teacher. It also supports students to take on equal amount of responsibility and ensuring an equal learning outcome among all individual students. The content is currently, however, only covering introductory level concepts, but it has potential to be expanded to cover more in-depth computer science ideas. And 50% of the time, of the playtime currently is spent on programming, which definitely has room for improvement, given that if we want to have a more in-depth class, kids will ideally be spending the majority of their time doing programming throughout the session. So with that, we want to thank everyone who have helped us throughout the entire semester. Nothing could be possible without all of the help we got, and this is pretty much everything we have for today, and we're now open for questions. Thank you.
So I'm curious what success looks like and how do you measure that?
So the question is, how do we measure success? I think earlier in the semester, we've had the idea of delivering an authentic computer science education content, but along the semester, this has pivoted into more of discovering if collaboration can be something that keeps them engaged in this kind of class. So we have incorporated, I would say, a similar amount of computer science knowledge as an introductory level Alice class. And while keeping the same educational content, we measure success by seeing if the kids are actively engaged and having fun working together to get the same outcome. Which is something that we witnessed at the 2 class sessions at St. David's School.
Hello? Yeah. I guess I wish you'd shown us a little bit of the kinds of scenes that students had made from this project to get an example of what the tool can produce. Is that because the process is in some ways more important than the outcome, and that you want them to learn the programming rather than producing scenes that are very interesting and compelling? Does that make sense? So are you focused more on the process of how they make the scene, or whether they can make scenes that look really interesting?
Yes. So I think the question is if the process of creating the scene is more important than the final scene created. And the answer is yes. We spend a lot of time examining and iterating on our design to help them have positive collaboration throughout the entire session. And we think that process of engagement and communication is more important than the final outcome.
I'm sort of curious more about the insight into collaboration here. I guess in your playtesting, what did you see as signs of like stronger collaboration? And then where did you focus your iteration? And like what were the strongest things you found you could change to increase the collaboration in your playtests?
Yeah. So after the playtesting, we add the we add the ownership system, because during the playtesting, we found that some of the students want to edit the partner's model. So we want to give them chance to communicate with each other, to request the model, the ownership of the model, or to, to send the ownership of the model to your partners. Yeah, that's really a good point. We changed. And we also changed like the scale of the ground. So for the latest version of our design, students can change the scale of the ground. In the very first version, the ground is unlimited, very, very huge. After the playtesting, we feel like the huge space is not necessary. So that's why we add the changing scale design. Yeah.
And I think to add on to that, two of the key points that we witnessed during playtest was one, the passing the control and the ownership was something that indicates that kids really understand the scene building system, and they're actively communicating to coordinate their control over different objects in order to program to add animation to them in the later stage. So that's one key points that we observed during the playtest. The other point is, as Rick discussed earlier, the signal block, which sends a signal and prevents the other thread from executing until it hears that signal. This is the key point that we think indicates that the kids really understand the programming concept of our programming system, understand the timeline, how it operates, and using the signal block to coordinate and making sure all their actions line up. So those are two of the key points that we observed during the playtest.
All right, that's time.
Thank you very much.
Good morning. This is Team Games for All, and welcome to our final presentation. These are the team members. Instructor is Heather, and we also have two professionals in accessible game design from the EA Positive Play group as our consultants. So let us start with an overview of our project. Our goal is to explore accessible game design patterns to push the boundaries of how people with disabilities can play different types of games in more accessible and challenging ways. Then comes a very natural question: what is the definition of accessibility? Or what is accessibility in games? Perhaps the following metaphor could help us better understand this topic. Imagine there are three people trying to see the view through this window, and it's our job to make that happen. And from the picture, it's clear that the window is simply too high for all of them, so an easy solution would be to give them 3 pairs of ladders so they can stand taller like this. But something is still not right here. The ladder might be perfect for the person on the right, but not so much for the other two. So a better solution would be to give each of them a different length of ladder according to their height, so that they can all reach to the window at a proper height. In other words, accessibility is not about providing a universal solution that solves everything, but more about tailoring your experience to cater every specific situation. We then researched on the accessibility settings in current games, and some problems that we noticed includes that the accessibility settings are buried deep within in the hierarchy of game menus, and some games have the feature of letting players to map the button themselves, but the process is often tedious, especially for players with disabilities. And so the current process of accessibility settings fall into the following loop. The player plays a game and try the control first. If it doesn't feel right, they'll have to go back to the menu, find the corresponding function, map it to another button, and try again until it feels right. What we want to achieve, however, is to provide the players with a personalized gameplay experience, and we want to do it in a seamless way. With that, here are the two solutions that we present. The first one focuses on adaptively adjusting the accessibility settings for the players, while the second one aims to smooth the button mapping process and by embedding it into the game tutorial.
Thanks, Jerry. So for this part, I'll go over the exploration process through the semester and also uncover why we made the design decision. We start our primary research by visiting Intermediate Unit 1, a local public school. They offer multiple disability support classroom, and John Balash helped us to connect with the school. Also, we talked to some experts in accessibility design at HCI. For example, Dr. Patrick Carrington and also PhD candidate Franklin Lee. And we invite our participants come to our project room, play test our game, and we conduct several interviews with her. And we have her test and try different game controllers. What do we found? Actually, the people with motor mobility disability, they have super diversified disability situation. So it is hard and almost impossible for us to focus on how to categorize people through the semester, and it's actually appropriate for us to categorize human beings according to their disability. So the challenge is how to design the same game for such a diversified group of people and bring them ideal experience. Refer back to the idea of accessibility. Actually, we want to customize, personalize, and tailor their game experience and control. But come to the real situation is that they are using all different type of hardwares. Maybe some adaptive controller or some gaming kit, or maybe Sip and Puff use their breath to control. So given the situation that we cannot regulate their gaming hardware settings, how to customize and tailor their game experience. Think about the metaphor of ladder. When you are designing a ladder for different people, actually the first step is trying to get their heights so that you can tailor the assistant tool for them. Similar in our case, we actually prioritizing how to getting user profile and information as the first step. For next part, I'll invite Dennis and Nielsen talk more about our design details and how we focus on our concept.
Thank you. So here comes the prototype and evaluation part. And our first prototype is about adaptive accessibility settings. It's a first-person railway shooter game. So here's the demonstration video. So this is the art style of our prototype. We mainly focus on using low poly models in a Western carnival scene. And how does it work? So first, we collect data in calibration level, and we run an algorithm to evaluate the performance score. Then the game is automatically set to a corresponding difficulty level according to the performance score. Moreover, in each stop, we will also tune the accessible setting based on players' performance. And this is the logic pipeline graph, shows how we can achieve our final result. Sometimes difficulty is naturally a part of the game. We use the personalized profile to predict the barriers. The system will adjust the size, moving speed, and lifetime of the targets, as well as the aim assist level to match the best difficulty level according to player's profile. And according to this system, here comes the keywords, personalized and seamless. Personalized means each player gets their own profile, which will lead to a unique and personalized experience. Seamless stands for the settings is automatically implemented, so there is no back and forth, and it also means the automatic adjustment happens in the back end, so the player is still in the game without knowing anything happens behind. After we collecting all feedbacks from playtest, the major iteration we made is giving players the choice of turning on or off adaptive difficulty. And we also added aim assist as another accessibility tool, which can benefit players with tremors in their hands. We conducted multiple playtests and used NASA TLX method to measure the subjective workload of our playtesters. Most of our playtester has the result of score around 4 to 6 in a range of 7, which demonstrate that our adaptive difficulty fits their ability level.
Our second prototype is a platformer with automatic button mapping, which holds this genre because it requires more complex control and it usually requires the player to be more precise with their actions. And our playtester Jen mentioned several times that she seldom plays this genre because it is simply too difficult for her with her current setup. So we designed this prototype with automatic button mapping in hope that this system can help the player with a wide range of control scheme to map their controls according to their unique individual situations and be less frustrating in that process. So the game is very simple. It only has 3 controls. One is a directional control, which can be an analog stick or a D-pad, and the other 2 are user-defined keys. With these 3 input, we are able to design a moveset that is simple enough that can accommodate all kind of control scheme, yet complicated enough for those who are seeking for a little bit extra challenge because they can come up with some advanced combos to get to certain unreachable locations. And here is our button mapping process. To start, we have a task assigned to the players, which asks them to move around the tutorial scene with the analog stick. This teaches them that they need to read the task and then complete the task before moving to the next step and get them acquainted with the mapping flow. And then we start by mapping the jumping button. It starts also by giving a task for the player, and that also prompts the player to pick the button for the jumping action. And then the player can actually pick what button they want to use for that jumping action. They can experiment with a variety of buttons before they make a decision. And once they make a decision, they have to repeat that same button several times as a consent for the game to actually map that button with that action. And then after repeating several times, the button is mapped by the game. And the same flow is repeated for the electricity as well. So here is a video showing our automatic button mapping process. So after playtesting and gathering some feedback from faculty members, we also made some improvement to our design. First, we changed the in-game text. The action referred to what the player should do in the game to the actual button they need to push. So that is easier to understand and more straightforward because they don't have to do the translation in the head. And also, since our game requests the player to press the electricity key and the jump key at the same time in multiple occasions, and we found that some players map the electricity key in a very awkward location that it cannot be pushed together with the jump key. So we also get some information from our faculty consultant, Tom, that we need to give the player more information about what to expect to prevent this kind of problem. So we also added that information in our text to solve that problem. We also added a remap menu in our game so that the player can change their button mapping setting if they're not satisfied with it. We also have a task feature in the game, in the menu, so that they can be transferred to a very safe location to test their adjustment out before returning to the game, so they don't need to worry about making mistakes or breaking the game flow. So we received mixed review from this design. For player with disability, we received very positive result generally, but for players who don't have disabilities, we have mixed opinions, but over 67% of those players agree that our system is not too complex for them. Here is some feedback from our playtester, Jan.
I really like the additional program for easily setting up custom buttons for a control. That is something that is often forgotten or poorly implemented. And in this case, it was very easy to set up, very quick. It really worked well. I enjoyed it, and I hope that more games can implement features like this in the future. I really like the additional program for easily setting up custom.
Okay, so for our deliverables, since we're an exploratory project,
our deliverable are 2 game demos with the evaluation dataset, the documentation of proposals, and then accessible on a game design framework. The next part is the retrospective. So the first challenge we faced was it was really hard to find playtesters with upper body disabilities and to get access to the assistive technology hardwares like SIP and PUF. So what we did to address the problem is we focused on a specific player case, and we resorted to playtesting with non-disabled players with the adaptive controller that we had. And our second challenge was that accessibility in gaming is an emergent field without a clear structure. So we've been reading a lot of research papers, asking experts and try to get access to all kinds of online resources. And we also wrote a literature review. And then we tried to emphasize with our target audience by playing games using an adaptive controller with only one hand. Admittedly, it is not as useful, but since we need to incorporate the feedback of a real disabled player, but it did help with understanding accessibility. So one of the lessons learned is designing, implementing, and testing accessible features are really time and resource intensive. But however, the demand is growing big, and other players can certainly benefit from those accessible features. So that is our presentation. Thank you. We're open for questions.
So is the goal to kind of explore a generalized approach for accessibility, or to take some of your findings as inspiration to a very specific game? And how did that influence your approach in general to this project?
Yeah, so actually when we're designing to explore a specific game, or we trying to kind of summarize a framework for the game, actually our team picked the direction of maybe trying to work on some generalized workflow and trying to kind of expand the kind of framework to many other different games. And we see some potential of our demos that actually the design concept behind them can be used for many other different genre or different part of the game. Yeah. Yeah, thank you.
Given that answer, how extensible is the button mapping? Because the game kind of had a simple set of buttons to begin with, so like how far do you think you can push that?
Yeah, I think the idea behind the button mapping is, so first, like, we can almost assume that all players with disabilities have to somehow remap their buttons because they are set in a default controller like map out, and then they have like different setups that doesn't necessarily work with that. So the button mapping process that we designed is actually just blending the button mapping process with the actual gameplay so they can get instant feedback. For example, if like a player, if the game doesn't have button mapping at all, which is terrible, they have to rewire all their hardware just for the game to work. And if the game has button mapping in a menu, then they have to go into the menu and then like make some adjustment and go back to the game and test it out, repeat for several times, which it's like a very frustrating process that players don't have disabilities don't necessarily have to face. So our idea is just to simplify this process, because like blending the button mapping process with actual gameplay can give you instant feedback about what your adjustment affect and then how is the button reacting to your body. So this is like our core idea, instead of like having to apply it to a specific genre or a specific game.
Yeah, the core idea is we're collecting data to build a player's profile so that the game adjusts to this profile. So button mapping is one module, and another module is to automatically adjust the accessibility options for you. And we can extend this to many others, like for people with visual impairment or hearing impairment. That's something we didn't do in our exploration, but it's certainly worth for other people to maybe do some research about the topic.
Have one more.
I'm curious for your deliverables, like what you created, who do you imagine would use them? Like who's your audience for that? And how do you think they would use what you've documented and learned?
So I guess for the final deliverable, because we have the demo, actually we were working with EA Positive Group, and they are interested in our projects and work closely with us, especially the evaluation parts of the game demos, and we will have the data passed to them. And also the game demos, the design framework is, I guess, our hope is that we want some game companies to see this kind of thing, to care about accessibility in game, because they are a huge market for the people with disability, and also it is worthwhile for designing these features can benefit more players instead of only the subgroup of players.
Thank you. We also put our findings and some of the resources on our website so that other game designer can go through all of those, which was shared from HCI and the EA Positive Group with us. Thank you.
All right, hello everyone. Welcome to the last final presentation. We're officially at the end of the semester after 20 minutes. We are Theater Archive. I'm Shan, I'm the producer. Standing beside me is Damien, our narrative and UX designer, Bokan, our programmer, Ray, our 3D and graphic designer, and finally Jingyuan, our UI UX designer. So Rolf and Mia has been our clients for the project, and Rolf and Mo are both our instructors. We are also working with Billy and Jae-hee as our external advisors. I want to pay special thanks to staff at La Mama, especially Sophie and Ozzy, who has been helping us throughout the semester. So let me recap. What is La Mama? It is actually an experimental theater club founded in 1961 by Ellen Stewart. It is an off-Broadway theater in New York City. So we're actually working with their archive, as you can see in the pictures, and they have a huge amount of collections that need to be digitized. So they are actually working on their digital collection, which is simply a web browser with catalogs, but they have 50,000 unique items, including all those posters, photos, props, masks, costumes, puppets, and a lot of show files as you can see in the cabinets. So their need is actually to expand the access into their archive, and they want us to create a prototype for them for a fundraising later. Maybe they can expand it into a bigger project. So what we decided to do is make an interactive and interesting AR archival experience. And we've identified our target audiences as follows. They will be students, performers, archivists, founders, etc. And now I'll pass down the mic to Damien to talk more about our tech and design solutions.
So for our client need, they want to have a user-friendly, no downloading needed software. And so we give them the web AR by using ACE for this platform. There are three main approaches we designed to have our product. The first is make guests become performer. And the other one is the augmenting information. The last one is bring the artifact alive. And they are can use all kinds of the exploiting the archive, theater archive. And This is our deliverables, and we have 5 placards, record our QR code, and we got 5 AR experience, and finally we got video documentation about all the progress. This is our general process. So once you finish 2-hour private tour with Ozzy, like you will look around by yourself freely, and then you read the placard close to the item itself. You scan the QR code, then you scan the item, and you will start our AR experience. Eventually, you will learn further information about this item. The next part I will hand over to Borkan to talk about it.
Thank you, Damien. So as mentioned before, we have 3 different kinds of design approaches. So now I will introduce the first approaches, which is make the visitors become the performer. And it includes 2 different kinds of AR experience. So the first one is the Nahazan masks. So the Nahazan is adapted from Navajo creation myths. And in the original show, the performers will wear those animal masks and try to represent the animals in the creation myths. But in the La Mama archive, the visitors cannot touch or wear those masks. Therefore, our first design goal is to let the visitors virtually try on those masks and become the performer. And our second design goal is for publicity. The visitors can take a selfie with those virtual masks and share it on social media, which can help La Mama archive attract more visitors. And the biggest challenge we met is how to make those 3D mask models look like the same as the original one. So finally, we make our model looks really realistic and vivid. And then here's the demo. So after you scan the QR code on the placard, you will see a playbill first. Then you can try on those virtual masks. And we have 3 different kinds of masks. And you can also take a selfie with those masks. And this is the second one. And the last one is a wolf. And we also have a 3D mode, so you can see the details of those masks. And finally, there's an info button. After you click it, you can get more information about the original show and the Navajo creation myths. And then I will introduce the second experience, which is Local 7 Pink Puppet. It is also designed by the same approach, which is make the visitors become the puppeteer. So the Local 7 Puppet is now displayed in the La Mama archive puppet room, where hundreds of puppets are well preserved in that room. And they all designed by the same artist called Federico. And this pink puppet is one of his representative work, and it's represent the Latino culture to some extent. So our design goal for this puppet is we want the visitors to learn more about how this puppet is being controlled and how it looks like on the stage. So finally, we decided to use the body tracking technology to let the visitors use their body to control this puppet. And this is also how the puppeteer controls the puppet on the stage. And our biggest challenge is still the modeling and rigging. And finally, we successfully made this puppet looks really natural and realistic. And here is the demo. So after you scan the QR code, you see the playbill for this show. And then you can become the puppeteer and control this puppet, use your body. And you can dance along with this salsa music, which is also from the original show. And we also have information for the Local 7, and also a short video clip of the original show to show how the puppeteer controls this puppet. Now I will hand over to Ray to introduce the La Mama collage.
Thank you, Borkan. So another experience we worked on is the La Mama collage, which is now displayed right outside of the Alan Stewart Theater on the 2nd floor. It was created for an exhibit as a representation of the La Mama archive. The collage is an eye-catcher for everyone who comes for a show. We wanted to share its rich history with nice information architecture using Web AR when the visitors are waiting for a show to open.
The biggest challenge for this one was to collect accurate information from different sources. So thanks again to Sophie and Ozzy, if they're watching the live stream, who helped us a lot with that. And here's the demo. So as soon as it detected the collage wall, those selected torn photos would appear gradually and gather to the center of the screen. And then visitors could rotate the photo as well as click for more information about the actor and the show. And also, the visitors could click for the full original version of the photo, which you cannot see anywhere else. And next, I will introduce our design solution for the posters, which is the teaser trailer live poster. We picked the La Marie Vision poster to build a prototype, as it's very eye-catching, and the show was avant-garde. The story is about the toxic relationship between the mother, Marie, and her son, the butterfly boy. So our design goal for the poster was to introduce the main characters and their relationship, as well as the brief story. Meanwhile, we hope it could arouse the user's interest in the original production. So how to do the storytelling in a short time and design meaningful interactions to help the visitors understand the story better were the challenges we had. So instead of introducing the whole story of the original show, we picked an essential and appealing part of the story with vivid dialogue, appealing visual elements, and well-thought-out interaction methods. We hope the user could understand the story in a fun way. And here is the demo.
Marie, look. There are many butterflies in the room.
I told you. Don't call me Marie. Call me Mom.
All right, Mom.
Good boy. Now, catch them all.
Mom, I got an Agrias.
Well done.
Another one. They are very precious. Really?
Of course. I dyed their wings.
I'm going to treasure them. There you go. But why? These butterflies look unhappy, just like me, trapped in a cage.
This is all about love. Mom's duty is to protect you. Once these beautiful butterflies fly outside, they will be dead soon, just like you.
Yep. And then as the other experience, you could click for more information about those characters. So next, I'll pass it to Jingyuan to introduce another experience we designed.
Thanks, Ray. Now I will introduce our design solution for the props, which is bring the bench to life. This bench comes from a show called Carmilla, and Carmilla was the adaptation of a 19th century Gothic vampire novel. It tells the story of two women, Laura and Carmilla. Carmilla is a vampire who in the end wins Laura's affection and draws her into the half-world. So Carmilla's action takes place exclusively on this red velvet bench, and it's actually the only prop on the stage. So our design goal is to show how the bench has been used on the stage, and we want to use AR to bring this bench back to life. We have two challenges. The first one is we were torn between two directions. One is to tell the story of the Carmilla, and the second is to introduce the bench itself. After playtest, we thought about what is the most interesting story about this bench. And finally, our team decided to introduce the bench itself. And we also designed an innovative way of showing the information in augmented reality. And here's the demo. After you scan the QR code on the placard, you start the AR experience. You first need to scan the mask. and an animated face replaced the mask. There are two, we'll introduce the two main characters. You can see they are sitting on the bench. And the crowds are 3 people behind the bench. After the experience, you'll have time to explore more info about this play and the bench. We also include several clips from the original show. So, our design can also be used in more cases outside La Mama, like museums, galleries, theaters, and libraries. And we run a playtest during the soft opening. Things we did well are, we have a variety of interactions. Our experiences are fun and immersive, and we also have a cohesive artistic style. Based on the feedback, we also made some changes. We deployed on physical placards. We reduced required reading, and we also improved the overall UI and UX design. So to sum up, our client is La Mama Archive. We created prototypes and solutions for fundraising later. We also designed 5 customized web AR experiences. Thank you for listening to our final presentation. We are Team Theater Archive. We are now opening up for questions.
So my question is about how do you place the guest in an optimal viewing angle for your AR experiences? Because where they stand, sometimes if they're too tight, they won't see all the butterflies. When the masks come up on the couch, they might come in real tight because the masks are so interesting. So is there any advice to the client on how to maybe stage the space where there's physical prompts as to how do you get the guest to stand where you want to fully appreciate what you've done?
So to answer that question, all of the demos are re-recorded back in La Mama's archive, so they actually have a lot of things that we cannot move. For example, the L'Amour Vivant poster is in front of a glass cabinet, so it is natural that you step away from it. Instead of, in our project room, you could just stand in front of the poster and do that. And it's very similar for other props. For example, the Carmilla bench, it actually has 2 little stool and 2 huge drums behind you, so you have a very limited standing space. And naturally, you will walk from this side and then see the bench and then scan the QR code. And even if you stand a little bit to the side, it wouldn't affect your viewing point that much. So yeah.
Mike stole my question, so I'll ask a different one. How was the project that you designed here inspired by the archives of La Mama itself and the kinds of media that you were working with?
Yes, because we meet the director of the archive, which is Ozzy. He introduced all these props, masks, and the play to us. And then we know about the stories and how, for example, how the bench has been used on the stage. And then we found what's the most interesting part of that play. And we talk about how we can show the most interesting story to our visitors. And that's how we are inspired by the archive itself.
Yeah, also I want to add that what we learned from this project is if we want to decide good experience for those items, those props, what we did do first is learn the details and background stories of those items. Only we learn that, we can find what is the most interesting part to show to the audience. Yeah.
Is this set up so that the client can add to it themselves or have someone else add to it?
Yeah, so as you can see in here, if they really liked our prototype and decided to do a bigger project with it, they could fundraise later, and we might not be the person to continue it, but it is definitely some prototypes they could add on to it.
Yeah, and also we hand out all the source code and art access to them, so they can, if they want to keep developing this, they can, yeah.
And as we mentioned, we provide a solution, a design solution for our clients. So if they want to explore more, develop more things like props, masks, they can use our design template to build more on it.
I'm kind of curious, what's the client's reaction to this? How have they responded to what you made, and how do they feel it fits into their goals for fundraising and for the archive?
So to answer that, I have to clarify our client are divided into different stakeholders. Our final client, Mia, has yet to see our product, but I've met with Sophie and Ozzy 2 days ago in New York, and they have a generally positive feeling to this, and we have already installed all of the 5 placards in the archive so that new visitors can go and test it out. And then it will probably take some time for them to gather guest feedback and then see if they want to continue on for a bigger project.